San Francisco stands as a modern American paradox, a city that simultaneously occupies the pinnacles of global wealth and the depths of societal despair. It is a metropolis of stark duality, where technocrats sign billion-dollar contracts in gleaming towers, while, mere stories below, fellow citizens fight for survival in shanty towns. The city is home to over 530,000 millionaires, yet they coexist uneasily alongside 600,000 residents living in poverty. It is a place where companies worth more than the entire stock market of the United Kingdom are headquartered, yet 726 people died from drug overdoses in a single year. To look upon the streets of the Tenderloin is to witness a level of drug-dealing violence and abject misery that seems impossible to reconcile with the iconic Golden Gate Bridge and the technological utopia promised by Silicon Valley. The pressing question that looms over the fog-laden city is how a municipality with the highest wages in the world, the most profitable businesses on the planet, and a GDP rivaling that of New Zealand could become so fundamentally broken. To understand the fracturing of San Francisco, one must first understand the accumulation of its staggering wealth. The city's history is defined by four distinct explosive economic booms, each expanding its influence and coffers. The first was the gold rush of 1849, transforming a tiny village into a bustling town, later cemented by the Transcontinental Railroad. The second boom arrived with World War II, utilizing Colossal Harbor to bring in skilled labor and expand the population. The third wave began in the mid-1990s with the dot-com revolution, where proximity to Silicon Valley attracted a global influx of engineers and investors, pushing the metropolitan population to over 3.2 million. Although the dot-com bubble burst, erasing trillions overnight, it laid the groundwork for the fourth and most significant boom, the rise of social media and modern big tech. Today, the Bay Area is the wealthiest metropolitan region globally, hosting the minds behind Apple, Google, Meta, and Uber. The money flowing through the city is extortionate, creating a standalone GDP of $250 billion. However, this golden image shatters the moment one steps onto the pavement downtown. The cognitive dissonance of walking through San Francisco is jarring. The streets surrounding the headquarters of the world's most valuable companies are littered with the debris of a humanitarian crisis. The city's reputation for innovation has been replaced by a grim notoriety for high crime rates, open-air drug markets, and rampant homelessness. While crime has always been a part of the city's DNA, dating back to the lawless days of the gold rush, the modern surge is distinct. Following a dip in crime post-2017, statistics have since skyrocketed back to critical levels. Violent crimes, burglary, and theft have escalated to the point where small businesses can no longer sustain operations. Historic establishments and beloved chains, such as the In-N-Out Burger in neighboring Oakland, have been forced to close their doors for the first time in history, citing the danger to staff and customers as the sole reason. The atmosphere of lawlessness is compounded by controversial legislative choices that have seemingly decriminalized theft. In San Francisco, the threshold for felony shoplifting is set at $950. Theft below this amount is often treated with such leniency that it has emboldened criminals to loot stores in broad daylight. While massive corporations can perhaps absorb these losses, small business owners are left decimated, forced to board their windows or reduce operating hours to avoid the peak times of criminal activity. This has resulted in a landscape of abandoned storefronts and trash-strewn sidewalks, creating an uneasy feeling that hangs heavy in the air. The government, despite possessing a treasury filled with tax revenue from the tech boom, appears paralyzed or worse, complicit through policy failures that have allowed the situation to spiral. Intricately linked to the rise in crime is a catastrophic drug epidemic. While the city has a counterculture history of drug use, the current situation is dystopian. The introduction of fentanyl has turned parts of the city into open graves. In 2023, the overdose rate in San Francisco was nearly 3 times the average for California and triple the national average. Between 2015 and 2020, deaths surged by thousands, and despite a brief dip, the numbers are climbing again, with 2024 on track to be a record-breaking year for fatalities. Walking through the city, one observes a tragedy of zombie-like figures, victims of potent opioids, existing in a state of semi-consciousness on the sidewalks beneath the billboards advertising the latest venture capital triumphs. The The correlation is undeniable. The neighborhoods plagued by open drug markets are the same ones suffocating under violent crime and homelessness. The homeless crisis in San Francisco is a statistical anomaly. The city holds the third highest rate of homelessness in the United States, trailing only Los Angeles and neighboring Oakland. While San Francisco accounts for only 0.25% of the nation's total population, it houses nearly 1% of the country's homeless population. This means the city creates or attracts homelessness at 4 times the national average. While substance abuse is a factor, the roots of this displacement are deeply economic. The influx of tech wealth created one of the most expensive housing markets in history. Demand vastly outstripped supply as the city failed to build necessary infrastructure. Since 2010, San Francisco built only 1 new home for every 8 new jobs created. The result is a decimated middle class, where a minimum wage worker would need 5 full-time jobs just to afford a standard 2-bedroom apartment. This gentrification was accelerated by the pandemic and the shift to remote work. Tech workers, commanding 6-figure salaries, turn apartments into offices, driving rents even higher and pushing service workers and longtime residents out of the market and, in many cases, onto the streets. The city's government has struggled to respond effectively. Critics point to a series of progressive policies that backfired, such as the district attorney's office focusing on leniency for nonviolent crimes to reduce prison overcrowding. This strategy, intended to be humane, arguably removed the deterrent for crime, creating a cycle where repeat offenders face little consequence. Furthermore, the allocation of public health funds has drawn ire. A specific program providing free alcohol to homeless alcoholics, costing taxpayers $5 million annually, was designed to regulate consumption and reduce crime, but critics argue it merely subsidizes addiction rather than funding treatment and recovery. The deeper narrative of San Francisco's decline is a story of tension between the city's historic identity and the Silicon Valley workforce. For years, residents viewed big tech as a villain. The arrival of thousands of startups distorted the local economy, causing evictions and closing independent venues in favor of sterile office spaces. The symbol of this divide was the Google bus, private shuttles that ferried tech workers from their gentrified city apartments to corporate campuses in Silicon Valley, clogging public infrastructure while their passengers remained isolated from the community. Protests erupted, but the lobbying power of big tech was overwhelming. Companies stacked town hall meetings with employees reading scripted endorsements of their presence, effectively bulldozing local opposition. Ultimately, the city lost every battle against the tech giants. Tax policies that could have mitigated the housing crisis were diverted or ineffective. Crime was managed with leniency rather than order. Big tech paid its taxes, but the money did not solve the structural rot. Ironically, the final blow came when the tech sector no longer needed the city. The pandemic proved that the workforce could operate remotely. Now, the very companies that reshaped San Francisco, driving up costs and displacing locals, are leaving. In 2023 alone, over a dozen multi-billion-dollar companies, including Meta, Snap, and PayPal, began vacating their office spaces. They are washing their hands of the environment they helped create, leaving San Francisco to deal with a hollowed-out tax base, a skyline of empty offices, and a population stranded in a cycle of crime, drugs, and poverty. The rich are exiting, and the broken city remains.